Good morning. It's a little early, but if we'll get started. Is it too loud, you think? Okay. Bring it down. A little bit more down. Okay. How's this now? Okay, good. Now I can hear myself, but that's okay. I think we're going to start. That's great. Thank you. We're going to start a little early because most people are here. So we'll call the meeting to order, and thank you all for attending. What we're going to do today is we're going to do the oral history presentation first, and this time it's an oral history of the Historical Society. So we've done almost 24 other groups, and now we'll do one of our own, which is probably appropriate because with the passing of Ken and Claire, much of our early history is being lost. Fortunately, we still have Dorcas here, who was there at the beginning. And so I asked her to take a look at the speech, and she didn't make any major changes in it, either grammar, English, or fact. So we'll go on with there. Then when the oral history is done, we'll do an annual meeting, and then the museum is open for tours, and we have one demonstration here. Mary Jean and I did a good job of planning a vacation and then coming back for 5 events the first week we were back. So I think we're all ready. I want to thank you all who helped out getting this ready to go. So we'll start out now with the history of the Leisure World Historical Society. In the history of the Leisure World Historical Society, it's really divided into 2 parts. The first part is from the Leisure World opened until late 1992. And during that time, there were at least 2 attempts to form a historical society, but neither one of those attempts was successful. So a number of records were collected during that time, and eventually Fred Cooper got those records and kept them. Among the things that were maintained were a number of early copies of the Golden Ring News, so that we'll talk about that a little later on, but it was fortunate that one of the major things that came out of the early societies were some very early records, some of the advertising films that were done to advertise Leisure World, and copies of the early newspapers. Then in 1992, a major factor for this organization happened, and that Ken and Claire Walker moved to Leisure World. And they moved into Ken's parents' home, and his parents had been early residents of Leisure World. They lived in Mutual 2. Now Ken had a PhD from the University of Minnesota in history, and his specialty was 19th century British diplomacy, and he had a very strong desire to get going in the Historical Society. And then Claire, who had been Ken's student when he was teaching at the University of Minnesota, working on his doctorate, also had a doctorate of her own as well. And they had both been educators all their lives, and so Ken had the desire and Claire had the drive to make it happen. And those of you who are little walkers in their good days know that this is probably true. Ken was always nice and quiet, and Claire always made sure that things happened. So they then met in late 1992 with Fred Cooper, and Fred was then head of the Recreation Department and had been an employee of Golden Ring Foundation since 1974, so he had a lot of history of Leisure World and was in a position to, having been in recreation all that time, be able to provide them a great deal of help. So they worked together to lay the foundation for the Historical Society, and then in April of 1993, they had the first meeting, and that meeting, you have the picture of the Historical Society on the bulletin board under first. It shows a picture of the group, and Dorcas was there that day and is here today. And that's actually the official founding date. Ken would never let us say that we started in 1992 because it didn't really get officially started until 1993. So that's April 1993 is our start. Fred provided all those things he'd been collecting to the Historical Society, and he was in a position to arrange storage for the Historical Society and a couple of file cabinets. Now, it sounds like a wonderful deal, but Dorcas can tell you that they were in a closet in Clubhouse 3, and if you wanted to get into that filing cabinet, you had to move all the flags and all the paraphernalia that were sitting in front of the filing cabinets, and we shared a closet with several other people who had things in that room. Then in late 1993, they held the first community meeting. And that was important because they did it, either by design or by accident, they stumbled on probably the best thing that we do, and that is they featured Leisure World clubs. And over 20 clubs came with their documents and their histories and all this kind of thing. Some of those came into our collection that night, and some later came in, but it did show that there was a very major need for keeping the records of the clubs, organizations, and Leisure World. As I say, either by very good planning or by happenstance, they hit upon one of our major features that we do. And for the next few years, there was collecting, monthly meetings, and educational meetings continued. Each year, there were new projects or ideas were added. For instance, in 1994, they held the second community meeting in the summer of '94, and that was to recognize people who had lived in Leisure World for 30 years. And there were over 130 people who were living in Leisure World for over 30 years. And they each were given a little paperweight. And you'll see some of those paperweights in the museum on file. Also, William A. Williams, who's the attorney for Leisure World, spoke about the early days. He'd been the attorney since 1964. So we have much of that information. He talked about the early years and the leaving Ross Cortese and coming into our own. So that was important. Also in 1994, we started the Oral History Project. And in those days, we started with residents. And we have over 20 residents who were early residents, and they're all on file on audio tape in the museum. There's a couple who lived along the wall in Mutual 2 who talk about horses putting their heads on the top of the wall. That was before they built the railroad and before they built the street, but it was the very early movement, and then of course very shortly after they built Westminster Boulevard and they put the railroad in called the coal. But it's interesting to talk about these early memories of what was going on. In 1995, we did a lot of work in collecting data about the flood. Those of you who lived here in 1995 know that on, I think it was January 4th or 5th, we got 4 inches of rain in an hour over the Leisure World. At the same time, we were having one of the high tides for the year. So the water was coming up the channel, and the rain was coming down the channel, and they met in Leisure World behind our service facilities down there. And if you lived in Mutual 2 or 3 or parts of 4, you got very much involved in the flood. And we did a lot of documentation of that, what happened, and it's there in the museum, and also some videos that we did. Then also, we started the Remember When column, started in March 1995, and we've had it in the paper every week since that time about what happened 10, 20, and 30 years ago. So that was 1995. Then in 1996, the Historical Society acquired the room which we use as a museum now. Originally that had been the exercise room. And when they first put it up there, no one thought it would get used at all. And that's why we have the 2 air conditioning systems in the room, because one didn't work very well, they had the second one before they moved. But when it was found they needed a larger room, they moved over to Clubhouse 5, where the Video Producers Club is now. And that area was the exercise room for a number of years. And then when we built Clubhouse 6, they moved upstairs. But our room was the original exercise room for Leisure World. And you can see, you can look at what we have today, that whole upstairs of Clubhouse 6 compared to what they had in that room there. And you can see that there was a need for more. Also that year, the Orange County Library was sold to Leisure World. And Bill Tate was the librarian at that time. He'd been the librarian for a number of years at Leisure World, at the Orange County branch, or the Orange County Library Systems Leisure World branch. Now, that was an interesting branch because there was the Mary Wilson one down here in Seal Beach, and there was a Rossmore Library up here. Air mile is about maybe a mile and a half apart. And to get to the Leisure World Library, you had to go up this unmarked road and from the outside. So when it came time for to decide which libraries to close, they decided we need to close this one, and we bought it. But Bill Tate had saved, as he became librarian in 1984, all the copies of the Leisure World News. And so he had them on, and then we had inherited when we started the club, from 1962 to 1997. So fortunately, by that acquisition, we got all the papers in for the Leisure World News were given to us. And that was, it gave us a complete set. And we've all, ever since that time, collected two papers a week, so the set is complete. Then we came to 1997, and that's when the docent program started. And it was very successful, but for a lot of reasons, it sort of went downhill as poor health. It took care of it. I think in about 2 or 3 years, we decided it didn't go on, and that's one of the things we want to do now is to get the docent program going back. It's one of those things that we think is a wonderful project. We'll talk a little more about it later on in the presentation. Then in 1998, Ken Walker and I wrote the first history of Leisure World. I think Ken wrote and I typed, but it was a great experience working with him because he really was a very, very fine historian. And we talked to Bill Williams and Bill Moran both to get more information. But we documented it, and it's been updated a couple times, but pretty much it's as it is. A couple things have happened. When we wrote the first one, the average house in Leisure World sold for about $75,000. And when about 3 years ago, Mrs. Brisky said, you know, I love your history, but I wish you'd take out that $75,000. Now, of course, for me, I wouldn't have to worry about this much, but we aren't down that far. But it's interesting. Then, in 1999, Claire Walker started the Highlight on a quarterly basis, and they've been done since then. She was editor for the first 5 years, and then after her health was no longer allowed to do it, Charlotte Morrell took over as editor of the Highlights and been working on it ever since. In 2000 and 2001 were sort of years of collecting and sorting and monthly meetings and educational meetings. And then we come to 2002, and that, as you all remember, was the 40th anniversary of Leisure World. We got very involved in working on that. And we did a thing called the Important Dates in the History of Leisure World as a handout for that event. And we have it still in the museum. And if you want to be a docent, that'd be a wonderful thing you can work on updating. And there's, you remember when is a way of doing it, but it's an excellent thing we need to bring up more into the present. It also was decided at that point that monthly meetings and educational meetings were probably more than we needed, and we would have a community meeting once every quarter. And that we would get, then the officers and interested members would meet for business sessions whenever they needed to, but not to try and have every month. It just was, there was not, but we've done very successfully to get other clubs, and then we hit upon the idea of most of our community meetings are oral history of the club. So it's given us a chance to have all these oral histories of the various clubs in Leisure World. From 2003 to the present, we've had the quarterly meetings and been held. The highlights have been printed, published. The museum collection continues to expand. And remember when it's been published. But we've been a quiet period of time. There were lots of things. Walker's health went down, healed, and lots of things happened. We've been going on doing things we've done before. So, what does the Historical Society have in the museum collection? Well, we have oral histories. We have over 30 recordings of individual oral histories. A few on videotape, most on audio tape. We have over 24 programs of Leisure World history of clubs and organizations. We have club records. As I said, that first public meeting they had club records were left with them, and they realized it was important. We have over 75 club records, and back in the back room, you'll see they're sort of like the safety deposit boxes. We have unique safety deposit boxes. They're called empty Xerox paper boxes. And we assign a box to either a club or maybe a couple clubs. There's not that many records, and we keep them there for storage. Like today, a scrapbook for Kiwanis got dropped off and put in the Kiwanis box so that it's there for the future. And every now and then we do it. Also, there's another club which may be leaving, maybe not having meetings anymore, but they're having their records moved over here to the place. It's a place you can know the records are safe. For the clubs that are active, they're open to the officers of the club to come in and use them anytime, or take them out, they can sign them off if they want to. Or if someone wanted to do research on a certain club, they could certainly use those records. Then we have scrapbooks, and we have over 40 scrapbooks of both clubs and individuals. Some people did, some active people did scrapbooks of what the things they did and during over the years. For many years, scrapbooks were a popular thing. I'm not sure there's much as popular today as they were. Maybe we'll come back again. But we have those, and they're on file in the museum. As I said, we have every edition of the Golden Rain News. And not only do we have the individual printed copies, which we put together by the Bill Tate's collection version of ours, but we have all the bound editions of the Leisure World News from 1963 to 1998. And that's the time. They're in those blue binders. And at one time they were stored up in the amphitheater. When we discovered them some years ago, we brought them down. We've got all but I think there's 6 years missing somewhere in the amphitheater, and someday maybe we'll find out where in the amphitheater they're hidden. But we have all those, and then also we have microfiche copies of everything from 1963 to 1998. And why the microfiche stops in 98 is that the paper went to putting it on disc rather than on microfiche, and so the only problem, we have all this paper, but there's only one minor problem: there is no index. So those of you who did research in college, if the New York Times or any other paper note, it's wonderful to have an index where you can go. But now if you want to do research, you have to sort of know something where you want to start as far as year and work your way through. But it's possible. When Bill Durant retired, Shirley Reimer spent probably 3 or 4 days going through papers from the years he was here, looking for stories, and then making copies of the pages and assembling them into a storyboard. So it's possible to do it. They're certainly available to people to do it. And if you have an idea what you are looking for, it's something we oftentimes get calls for obituaries. And of course, two things. Number one, we don't put everybody's obituary in the paper. And number two, you have to know about when they died to know where to look for it. Then we have the Leisure World China. We have over 200 pieces of the China, which was manufactured by Gladding McBean Company of Glendale, in Glendale. Or it says Rossmore Leisure World, and the name of this was Rossmore Leisure World. But when Ross Cortese left it, we changed the name to Seal Beach Leisure World. So the China says Rossmore Leisure World, and it was originally believed to be a set for about 400. Fred Cooper and I were talking about it the other day, and he's not sure exactly, but he thinks that probably was there. But over the years, it was probably produced when Leisure World opened in 1992. Over the years, these pieces got broken and lost and missing, and so in the 70s, the Golden Ring Board directed Fred Cooper to sell the remaining pieces. And he said one of the great regrets he has is he didn't fight a little harder to keep it as a set, for historical purposes. But no sooner did they sell it, did not get sold off, the pieces started coming back to Fred. People said, we bought this and we'd like to have you keep it for us. And so he kept it. We got that. We probably had about 55 pieces when we started in 1993, and now today we have over 200 pieces. They're donated by people who bought it at the time. There's a beautiful three-tiered serving tray that's over in Clubhouse 2 that Edna Sharp bought when it was up for sale, and she gave it to us some years ago. And then people keep finding pieces in the estate sales here, and they will buy it and bring it to us. In fact, that's how we got our 2 cups that we have now for years and years. We had one broken cup that was pieced together, and now we have a broken cup pieced together in 2 good cups. Then slides. We have over 1,000 slides that Carol Rasmussen compiled in a book. Those things that she could identify. And we have a number of slides that she had no way of knowing who they were or when they happened, and so those we have just stacked away. We have the videotapes. We have over 400 videotapes, and Sylvia Stoddard is taking the best ones of those and putting them onto disc, because those of you who know anything about it know that videotapes don't last very long, and we're hoping to save a great deal of that information and try and figure out which are the most important ones and get them saved, and work our way through the rest of them. We have over 100 books by Leisure World, either authors. And these are authors who either were writing about Leisure World or had lived in Leisure World at one time and donated their books. And so they're in the collection and in a couple of displays we have. There are a number of people who have written their biographies, and there were a number, for some years, classes taught on writing biographies, and so some are small little paper tracts, some are actually very well published books. Interestingly enough, back in the far corner, if you always walk in the door, the far left-hand corner all the way back is a plaque. And I noticed yesterday in the ceremony, someone made a comment that we have one of the largest concentration of World War II veterans in the country living here in Leisure World. Well, at one time we had one of the largest concentrations populations of World War I veterans living here in Leisure World. And they have what we call barracks, and that's the plaque in the history of barracks, World War I barracks of 2860, which at one time was the largest barracks in the country of World War I veterans. In fact, I remember when we first moved here, there was still Wesley, who was almost 100 years old and still very active. In fact, we went into a meeting one night in Clubhouse 2, and here he is, 99 years old, up on a chair adjusting the drapes. And so you can see that he was still a very, very dynamic person long into his life. He died about 2 years later, I think. And fortunately, when he died, his family gave us the history that he had kept on the barracks. So we had the next to the plaque, which used to be a Clubhouse 2 of all the people who were in the barracks, is the history of the barracks. So it's a very interesting piece of man to have. What new things would we like to do? And there are a couple things. We're starting to write more articles for the papers about historical things that happen in Leisure World. And I think we've been very successful in that. Ron Volker has done a couple, and it has increased people stopping by the office to ask questions and come by and see what we have. We're working on this restoring and saving the museum's videotape collection, and we're trying to reactivate the docent program. And there's a strong need for volunteers to help maintain the history of our community. And what can volunteers do? Well, the museum, we're trying to keep the museum open one afternoon a week for 2 hours, and that would be a place to come in and help out. You could after you receive training, and there's a book there, a desk book, which helps you answer questions, most asked questions. And then you can work on a project if you wanted to. If you wanted to do some research or writing or sorting, you can do that, or you can do that kind of thing on your own time. Then we have a large number of items that we've received but not been cataloged. And there are probably 3 or 4 boxes that we need to be working on a system where if you wanted to volunteer, you can catalog them into major catalogs, and then we'll help get them into smaller catalogs as we go along. And you wouldn't have to worry about whether you did it right or wrong. We have someone check it after you got done. So we could have a very much of a need for that. And then we have a chance for a person to write articles about the Leisure World history. And that would be a very, very important thing. And then you can also work on displays. We have some displays, but our displays are almost history in themselves. And they've been up so long, we could use some new ones. But we have the museum, which has some displays. We have a display case in the lobby of Clubhouse 1. We have a display case in the lobby of Clubhouse 2. And then we have the storyboards back, what we have back there. So those are things that people can do, and we'd be happy to talk to you about them. Like every organization, we need the ideas and work of new volunteers to make the Historical Society a success and preserve the history of Leisure World. Are there any questions about Leisure World history that I'd like to be able to answer? It's a fascinating thing, and we've been very, very lucky in the things we've been able to do in restoring and collecting. Yes?
I have an addition to your story.
Okay.
My next door neighbor, mother and father-in-law, paid $1,600 for their apartment.
Yes, it's amazing. 1,600. In fact, in the early times, there were some people who didn't pay anything for their apartment. That was one of the problems they had. They had some trouble selling. They sold well at first, and then they had some terrible rains, which when the earth was being moved around, the rains came along and sort of wrecked all the earth moving, and they took them a couple months to dry the whole place out. And they fell behind a bit, but there were times when the people who were willing to assume the mortgage payment, or the service fee, which would pay their mortgage, would come in. They would be happy to come in without having to pay a great deal of money. Also, early on, it was very difficult to sell unit because no one understood in California common interest development. Common interest development was a very big thing on the West Coast, in the East Coast, but not out here. And so that's why the resale office was built. FHA required us to put in a resale office because people just didn't have a market for selling their units at first. Yes, huh?
It was interesting to me, if I have the facts right, a fellow named Snow that discovered an option for the library.
Yes.
And we were able to going back in history
Paul Snow was
documentation on that.
Paul Snow was he was president of Gold Rain at the time and was very active in working with the county. So the county was going to close libraries because obviously they'd gone into bankruptcy. And as I say, there was our library was being used by one group with almost no public access between two active libraries. And if you had children-looking libraries for references, people using this kind of libraries, there was really no justification for ours. And then Paul was very active in getting it done, getting the bid done. He worked very, very closely with Mr. Silva, who was the supervisor at the time. And the two of them worked together to get the county to accept the bid. Because not only that, but the Friends of the Library building had been built on shared funds. And so people in Beachville had paid for the Friends of the Library building, part of it, and the city had paid for part of that building. So the county finally came up through and let us have it. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
This is back to the cost of the buildings. I don't know, some of you remember Ethel Anderson?
Uh-huh.
Right. She paid $500.
Yes.
She came in on one of the last people.
Yes, and she was one of the founding members of the Historical Society.
Yes,
And she was actually the original secretary for the Golden Rain Board when it broke from Ross Cortese. And she worked, and there was no administrative offices for many years. They actually operated out of an apartment in Mutual 14 there across the golf course, where the extra parking lot is for parking for Clubhouse 1. And the reason was that Ross Cortese never planned to have administrators here. He planned to take everything handled at Laguna Woods, and that's what caused the big fight. They said they saw their money going down to Laguna Woods, and no one appeared above a manager, no administration. So that's what started the breakup. Yeah, that's right. She was the first. Anyone else? Yes.
Another one. I believe the first assessment, people moving in, the assessment included medical.
That's right.
That's interesting.
That's right. When there was the assistant, Ross Cortese was a very forward-thinking person. This was the first senior citizen community built for active life. Even though it was financed by FHA, it was for country club living, quote unquote, and you had to have a minimum income. It wasn't subsidized housing. It was just like any other housing for FHA. And one of the things he did was he had free medical care as part of your payment. You paid like $100 a month, and that included your mortgage, your insurance, your taxes, and your free medical care. This is 1962. They started charging a little bit somewhere around 1964 or 65. What happened is when Medicare came in, they could no longer have the foundation pay the medical bills for individuals. The individuals had to pay their own medical bills, so they had to change the whole concept that you had to pay. You took Medicare, and then they would be happy to service your Medicare, and that's right. You're right. It did come in, but Medicare is what changed the whole thing because the way Medicare billing was done, it wouldn't build the foundation for the cost of medical care. Anything else? Yes.
The amount that the house is sold for in 1962.
I'm not sure. The Mutual 15 was the last one. They had a listing price of $10,000, but you only had to pay about $1,200 down. So I'm not sure what the earliest ones were. I know that there were some people who paid around $1,000 to move in initially. But remember, this is 1962, and remember how much it cost you to buy a house in 1962? It wasn't, it wasn't a lot of money, but it wasn't, it isn't like we think about it. The major problem happened during the Carter administration, when inflation became so terrible and there was no COLA on Social Security. So you had people who were collecting Social Security at the 1962 level, who were now having to pay rates based on the inflation that had happened in the meantime. And that's a long story in its own, but that's what happened. Okay, anybody else? Then we'll now move over to the meeting part of the annual meeting, and we'll start out with the treasury report.
Well, we started in September the 1st when I took over the books. You probably need a microphone. Do you need a microphone?
Why don't you come up here? You want to come up here and use the mic on the front side. So you have it.
When Mr. Barratt handed me the books on September the 1st, he had $4,984.25 in the checking. And it was an interest-bearing checking at California National, and we made $1.07 in September and 99 cents in October, so we had $2.06 in interest. And then we found an envelope in there for some cash sales, and we don't know, it was probably from '04 or '05 for $36. So we had an income of $38.06. And then Mr. Barratt ordered some mugs. I guess they were Leisure World mugs.
Now, the historical society mugs, they look exactly like this. We had run out of mugs, so we decided we would get some more. And we were able to get a very, very good deal on it.
So we paid $228.95. That included the setup charge and no shipping. And then Mr. Barratt had to have some stamps. And then we had to have the print master, Historical Society printed up. So our expenses were $308.66. We now have $4,713.65.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking over. And you may know that we'd only had 2 treasurers in the whole history. For many, many years, Harold Goff was the treasurer, and then when he got too ill, Margaret Foster took over, and with her death in April, we suddenly were without a treasurer, and we finally asked Mrs. Deal if she would, based on her vast experience as a banker and treasurer of the Women's Club, a number of other organizations, would take over, and now we have a professional treasurer again, and thank you very much. Dorcas, will you give the nominating committee report?
I guess you want me to use the microphone?
I would think so.
Before I give the report of the nominating committee, I'd like to make a comment. Tom likes to tell the story that I'm the oldest member, but you know, he joined about 1 month after I did. And he has been a stalwart backbone of the Historical Society all through the years. And setting up the facilities and making all the rest of us committee members look pretty good. But Tom's the one that's been there behind, and we do appreciate all that you do. The committee members of the nominating committee are Jean McKenzie, Ann Smoline, and myself, Dorcas McCormick. We present the following slate of officers for the year 2009 for President Tom Barratt, Vice President Ron Vogler, Secretary Ann Smoline, and Treasurer Vern Deal.
Thank you very much. Are there any further nominations from the floor? Then we'll accept the nominating committee report for the next year and declare those people elected. And thank you very much for doing that, Dorcas, and Jean. And
What's the salary? I forgot to ask.
the salary is. Well, actually, we keep it. The Golden Ring director gets the same. You get the same structure as the Golden Ring director with the same cost of living increase that the Golden Ring and the mutual directors get. So it's a nice fee schedule. Now I have to take a minute to thank everybody. The nominating committee, first of all, Jean and Dorcas and Ann. Ann's not here today because she had surgery, and she's doing very well, but she doesn't feel like walking much since the surgery was on her leg. But she's recuperating well, and hopefully she'll be back for the next meeting. I want to thank Charlotte for the highlights. They look great and they keep us going. I want to thank the O'Brien sisters for doing the telephone committee and reminding all of you of the time to come out here. I want to thank Chuck Burnett and for his work on the video. And I'd like to this time present Chuck with a cup. Now Chuck has a cup, but Chuck has an old-fashioned cup. Now Chuck is going to be the first person to get one of the new ones, which has a little bit different logo on it. And now we're becoming fancy. We're having the logo on both sides. It costs us no more to get both sides. And now you'll know. Now you know what you're drinking, but everyone else will know what you're drinking. Thank you very, very much. I know. Mustache either. Anyway, they're going to be. We'll be selling them very shortly. As Fern said, we used to sell the cups, and we used to sell a very nice bag, and we did it for a number of years, and we suddenly found out that money had gotten stashed in there by somebody, and we found it the other day, and now we're wealthy again. And we'll be putting out, probably in the next highlights, what we're going to do with the cups. And also we have some of the sacks left, and they're very attractive. It took me a long time to figure out where we ordered them from. And then when I was going through the records that the Walkers had, I finally found the invoice, and it solved the problem. I kept looking for online locations and catalogs. It turned out they did it in a local store in Seal Beach. So it was there and done. If you want to make a pitch for the docent program, we'd be happy to talk to anybody, myself or Dorcas, or we'd be happy to have you help out on it. And then I would like to also encourage you that there's a sign-up sheet over there. If you aren't getting the highlights now, which is our quarterly publication, and you want to sign up for it, please do put your name down there, and we'll be happy to send you a copy. Now, at this point, we'll adjourn here, and you're happy to go in the museum and look at what we have. You can take a look back behind the cabinets there with the papers in it, and they'll show you where the boxes are storing the club records. Thank you all very, very much for coming.